Hey, what's up everyone, I'm Yash Makan and welcome to my YouTube channel. So in this particular video, we'll be making a complete chat application in Flutter with the help of Google's latest AI model known as Gemini. So if you don't know, Google has recently launched its own AI model which is called as Gemini, and we'll be using that in today's video and integrating that with our own chat application. We'll make the entire project from the very beginning and we'll talk about all of the technical details as well in this video. So we'll talk about all of that, what and all APIs we'll be using and how basically Gemini will be integrating inside our Flutter project. So first things first, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do that as it will really help the channel out. Just go to my channel and click the subscribe button. There are a lot of interesting videos that you can watch as well that I'm pretty sure that you'll like. So with that being said, let's start with our today's project. Alright then, so let's talk about what is Gemini. So Gemini is the latest Google's AI model that has launched, and basically it is a multi-modal model. As you can see, Gemini is built from the ground up for multi-modality, which means that it is for text, images, video, audio and code. So whatever input you can imagine, it can take that and give the output back. So you can see that it has a lot of functionalities and it can be used to build a lot of applications. So in this video, we'll be using the Gemini AI model and integrate that inside our own chat application. So it is basically like a chat GPT alternative, and you can see in the website as well all of the benchmarks with the Gemini Ultra and the GPT-4 model comparison. So you can see that Gemini Ultra is doing pretty good job as compared to GPT-4. Now Google has launched its own 3 models, that is the Gemini Ultra, Gemini Pro and Nano. So at the moment, Gemini Pro is publicly available, which we can test it out as well, and the Ultra and the Nano models are not yet available publicly. So we'll be making the video on Gemini Nano as well, which is a on device model. So we won't be using any API or any network APIs for that. In Android or in iOS, we'll be using the Gemini Nano model. But right now we'll be using the Gemini Pro model, which is publicly available, and we'll be using the API, the Gemini API for that. Perfect. So you can see that it is anything to anything. So let's just make that, and for a better understanding, you can check it out, the hands-on video provided by the Google's team for the Gemini. So with that being said, let's open up the Android Studio and create our Flutter project. I'll open up the Android Studio and create a new project here. I'll name the project as Gemini Chat, and everything else will be fine, and let's just create the project. Alright then, so our Flutter project is made. So what I'll do first is I'll remove all of these comments, and I'll remove this my homepage class from here. Here I'll create our chat page. So chat page, I'll make it. First, I'll go inside the pubspec YAML and add the packages that we'll be using for the project. So below this Cupertino icons, I'll add these packages. So here we'll be using the Flutter chat UI package for the UI of the chat that we'll be using. The API that we'll be using, so for the API integration, we'll be using the HTTP and the WebSocket channel. WebSocket we'll be using for the real-time updates, and HTTP we'll be using for our API. So, and there we'll be using some other packages as well. For example, the image picker for picking the image from gallery. We'll be using Intel for the date format, and UUID for the unique device ID as well. So that's all packages we'll be using. Once all of these packages are added, we'll run the pub get once. So here you can see that all of the dependencies are added. So that is great. Next, let me just minimize that, and inside the lib folder we'll create our folder structure. So first I'll add just the views folder where I'm going to create our chat page. So here I'll just create chat page .dart. Great. And next we'll be making a folder called as utils, and inside that I'll create a file that will be our chat manager. Perfect. So first we'll use the Flutter chat UI inside our chat page. So I'll import the material, create a stateful widget here for our chat page, create a scaffold, and inside the body I'm going to create chat, and this chat widget is basically coming from our Flutter chat UI package. So this library Flutter chat UI, we've imported that. Now inside that we'll be needing a few required parameters that we have to pass, so I'll just pass that. So it is asking for messages, on attachment pressed, on send pressed, show user avatars and username show, and the current user. So all of these details we've passed. Now we've got some errors as well, so we'll fix that. So first thing, we'll assign our messages. So here I'll just create our messages as well and import the chat types. So here I'll just copy this Flutter chat types and import that as well as types. There we go. So that error is gone as well. Next we can assign this user as well. So here up below the messages I'll assign the user. So basically types.user and then any ID we can pass. So I am writing it as user. Perfect. So our messages and user is initialized and we are passing that to our chat widget. Now it is asking for on attachment pressed and on send pressed buttons methods. So handles send pressed we can make below this build method. So here basically what is happening is we'll be using, first I'll import the UUID for passing the ID for each text message, and we have a add message method as well. So basically first I'll create this is loading as well. So boolean is loading is equals to false, I'll make it. So now whenever send is pressed, that time we are checking. If it is not loading, then we are making a text message and then we are using this add message method and then passing the text message. So what we'll do is I'll move this messages to our chat manager instead. So I'll create a chat manager here, and inside that I'm just going to pass this messages, and I'll go and take this import as well and move it to the chat manager. Perfect. Next, this is done. I'm also going to move this user to the chat manager only. Alright, now once that is done, next what I'm going to do is I'm using the chat manager. So here I'll assign final chat manager is equals to chat manager. That's it. Now we can use this chat manager to get the messages. So dot messages and dot user. Now we can use this chat manager add message, so we can create this method as add message. So I'll just create that void add message, and this will take a type of message from here, which it is taking text message, or I can just let the import add that import as well. So I'll just copy that and paste this import here. Okay, and this also chat manager dot user. Cool. So On clicking the send button, you can see that if it is not loading, we are making a text message and then we are adding that message to our chat manager. Perfect. And next, on attachment pressed also we'll create. So below that, so here I'll just make the method. Now you can see that first inside the method I'm using the image picker to collect the image from the gallery. So once we have the image, we are checking if the image is not equals to null. So if it is not equals to null, we are capturing the byte for that image, and from that bytes we are getting the image right here. So decode image from list, this method we are using to get our image. So that is what we'll be using, and from that image we have properties like image dot width, height that we can use and pass that inside our image message. Now here also I'm just going to use the chat manager. So chat manager dot user. Perfect. So once that is all done, we are getting our message, and I'm just going to use the chat manager dot add message to add this message as well. Perfect. So this is our handle image selection as well. So our chat page is done here. We'll also add some styling here. So here I'll just pass a theme. Now here you can see that this theme we are passing, and the default chat theme we can pass, and I'm passing the background color, image border radius. So all of these theme styles we are passing, and you can modify that accordingly as well to change the theme. Now inside the main.dart, let me just import the chat page as well and pass that. Perfect. So all of the errors are gone as well, and our chat page is added. Now let's just create our add message method as well, because right now it is empty and we are not adding any message here. I'll also move this is loading inside the chat manager as well. So here I'll just paste this is loading, and where I'm using that, I'll just use the chat manager dot is loading. Next, here inside the add message, we can add the logic as well. So it will insert the message, whatever message we are adding, to the 0th index. So it will add that in the bottom, and then is loading we can make it as true. That means that once is loading is set to true, they cannot add or pass any more images anymore, because we are having our is loading condition here. So that is cool. Next, we are checking if the message type is of text message, then we are simply inserting that on 0 with a text of empty text, and here the author is of type bot. So let's just create a type of bot as well. So here, like we are doing with the user, I'm just going to create a bot as well, and instead of this ID, I'll create it as model, and the first name I'll pass as Gemini. So perfect. So our model is added as well. Now let's just run the app as well inside emulator to check if everything works or not. So I'll just open up the Android emulator here. Perfect. So our emulator is launched as well. I'll just run the project once. Alright then, so our application is built as well, and you can see that no messages here yet message we can see inside the app. So now if I try to pass any message here, for example, hello, and I can click this button, and on clicking this button, we are calling this method. So you can see that on send pressed, we are having this callback method, which will be called is loading will be false. That means that we'll add the text message inside our chat manager. Okay, so once it will add, everything will work just fine. It will insert that, and then what I can do is after adding, I'll just call the set state method as well, and let's just hot reload once. Now if I click, you can see that hello is added, and after that we have added a empty message as well. So this empty message we'll be using to add Gemini's response here. So next what we have to do is here we have to integrate WebSockets and integrate our Gemini real-time API. So whenever we are sending any message like hello, it has to respond back to us as well. So we have already added our WebSocket and HTTP for our API calling in pubspec.yaml. So what we can do inside our chat manager only, I'll create a late WebSocket channel. So I'll create a WebSocket channel known as channel. So this channel we'll be using here. So I'll create a void of initialize WebSocket. So inside this method we will be initializing our WebSocket, and also what we will do is inside the add message I'll use this channel to add the message of this message text. So basically this line means that we are sending text message to the backend API. So whatever message we are typing, we'll be sending that to our backend API to get the response back. So once we are sending that, we have to listen back for the response as well. So inside this initialize WebSocket only, we'll be listening, we'll add a listener as well to the stream, and whenever a message we've got, we'll update our last message as well. So here inside this initialize WebSocket, what I'll do is I'll just add our channel and we'll create a IO WebSocket channel here. So I'll just import the WebSocket channel io.dart here, and inside that we'll be passing our 10022, which basically represents the local host of our device. So if you have a API or if you have deployed the API on any cloud server, then instead of this 10022 you will be passing the URL for that API. So right now this will work, and the port that we are using is 8000. So I just added that, and the endpoint for the WebSocket is /ws. So we've added that as well. Perfect. So once we have initialized our channel, this method we can call inside our init state. So inside our chat page, I'll just create a init state as well, and here I'll use the chat manager and call the initialize method. So initialize WebSocket. Once our channel is initialized, I can use this chat manager dot channel, and I can then use the stream, and with the help of the stream I can use the dot listen method to listen for any event that we are getting from the stream. So this event basically represent all of the response that we'll be getting back from our chat manager channel from our backend. So inside here the chat manager channel stream dot listen, I'll be using the chat manager dot on message received. So we'll create this particular method and then we'll pass our event as it is, and after that set state we can run. So let's just create this method as well, and here inside the method let me just rename this to response. So now inside that you can see that on message received I'll be getting the response, and if I'm getting as angular brackets fin, that means that we'll make the is loading as false. So whenever we've got the complete message from the backend, we'll be receiving back fin. Otherwise we'll be getting our response, so we'll be concatenating that to our message.first. So the first message that we have, so this is the first and second message, so we'll be concatenating the current message. So we are using the copy with method here, and we are simply incrementing that to our current message, so that whatever message we are getting from the backend, we'll be continuously adding and including that to our current message what we've had now. So on message received method we'll call, and event we'll pass, And after that, once the message is added inside the messages array, we'll call setState to rebuild the UI as well. Right now I am not using any state management, but it is much beneficial to use state management like provider so that we can handle the state much better. So once that is done, now we are listening for any message received changes as well, and on clicking the send button as well, here we are sending the message to the backend. So everything is in its place. Now only thing we need to do, so if I hot restart now, you can see that I'll be getting an error, and the error is that, okay, once let's just go up. So you can see that socket exception connection refused on 10.22 and the port this. So basically on this 10.022, the WebSocket is not running at the moment because we have not made our backend yet. So inside the Flutter, we have already done everything that has to be done. Now what I'll do is I'll create our Python backend and then move into that. So if you don't know Python as well, you don't need to worry about that because the API that we'll be writing is pretty easy and pretty small, and I'll be explaining each and every part of that as well. But first, let me show you the Gemini API. So for the Gemini API, you have to get the API key. So you have to go over to the makersuite.google.com. I'll be providing all of the links in the description box as well, so make sure to check those out. Now once you've got to the makersuite.google.com, you have to create an account using your Google account. So you can create that, and here you can see that I have already logged in, and I've already logged in with my account, and I can use here the Gemini Pro model, as you can see. Now to get the API key, I have to go in the top left. You can see the get API key, and here I can access the API key. So just click here and you can copy this from this button. So I have copied the API key. Once you've copied that, you need to use that API key inside your backend that we'll be writing, right? So let me just open up the Android Studio. So now let me just open a PyCharm, and then we can use this particular API key inside our Python backend. Alright, so now I'll open up the PyCharm for our Python backend as well. Now here I've already wrote the Python backend code as well. So let me just show you that. Inside the main.py, I have wrote a demo script, and all of the code will be provided in my GitHub repository. So make sure to check that out as well. Now what I am doing here is that first we are importing the Google Generative AI Gen AI module. So we are importing that, and we are also importing OS and .env library. So basically this load env method, what it's doing is that we are loading all of the environment variables from this .env file. So we have made this .env file to store our Google API key. So inside that you can see that my Google API key is available. So I'm just passing that, and I'm using the genai.configure to configure the Gen AI library and passing the API key. So after that, I won't be having any issues. Next, I'm using the Gemini Pro model. So I'm just specifying the model name. I am creating a chat object by using model.startChat. So that will create a chat, and then send message method I can use in chat, and then I can pass any message. So I can create what is your name, and then response I'll be getting back, and in chunks. So I have passed stream as true. So we'll be getting the message, the response in chunks. So we'll be logging that as well. Now if I click on run, okay, so if I change this to main.dart and click on run, basically Python main.py, you have to run this script. You can see that I am a large language model trained by Google. Perfect. I can ask, are you better than ChatGPT? I can run it again and it is stream, so I'll be getting the response back one after the other. So perfect, as you can see that we've got all of the response. As a large language model, I am different from ChatGPT in several ways and we've got all of the basic details one after the other. Perfect. So this is like the basic script in Python, how Gen AI or Gemini AI, how we can utilize in Python. Now we'll make a basic Python API script and utilizing that with the help of WebSockets inside Flutter. So we'll be using Fast API because it provides a WebSocket and it's a very clean way to use WebSocket as an API. So here also we are loading the environment variables and creating our chat object from this Gemini Pro model that we have created. After that, we have created an app model from this Fast API class. So from this app, first we have initialized our WebSocket endpoint for the WS. So inside our Flutter application, as you saw, we have this WS endpoint that we'll be using to connect with our WebSocket. And another we have is the fetch messages. So this method is used to fetch the messages inside the init state. So we have to add that as well. And it is a get method of the API. So app.get endpoint and then response model will return list of dictionary. So list of map in Flutter we will be returning. So we will returning the role and text. Role basically will represent here. So if you saw inside the Flutter as well, we've passed the ID user and ID model. So inside the role, we'll be getting if the message is from user or model. Perfect. And the text will be the text message what that role has passed. So we'll be using the current chat history for that user. We'll be using the UVCon library to run our Fast API. Perfect. So that is it. This 50 lines of code, that's all we need to write. Inside this WS WebSocket endpoint, I'm basically accepting. So once I've got a connection, I'll just accept that. And while true, I'll receive the message. And once I got any message from the client, I'm checking if it is bytes or if it is a string. If it is a string, I'm checking if it is not equals to FIN. That means if we've got a FIN from the client, we'll just close. Otherwise, we'll send the message as a stream. So this line is using the Gen AI, the Google library, using the chat object to send message and getting the response. Now for each chunk that we are getting, we are sending it back using the WebSocket to our Flutter side. So this chunk will be sent back to our Flutter and then we can listen to them inside our init state that we've called right here. So this event is nothing but the chat, the chunk that we'll get. And now at the end of the chunk, so once all of the messages are sent, once all of the chunks for that message response is sent, we'll be sending FIN. That means that the client will know that all of the response we've got for that particular response and none other chunk is remaining. So you can see that inside my on message received, I'm checking for this FIN as well. And once I've got all of the messages, I'm just calling is loading as false and I'm not appending it again to the messages.first. Makes sense, right? So that's it. Now let me just change the configuration to API and just run that. You can see that the server has started on local host and the port is 8000 because I have specified 8000. Now device local host in Android phone means that it is running on 10022. So you can see that inside our initialized WebSocket as well, we are using 10022. So that will work just fine. Now if I try to hot restart, you can see that I'm not getting any error. That means that our WebSocket is initialized successfully. If I go to the backend, you can see that connection is open as well, and this accept method is called. So it is accepted from the WS WebSocket endpoint. Perfect. So now if I try to send a message, for example, how are you? I can just type send, and here you can see that we've got a response back from Gemini model. As an AI language model, I don't have personal feelings or emotions. I'm a computer program designed to provide. Now the cool part of this script, this program, is that I can write in conversation. So I can type like, my name is Yash. I can click send, and now it will just remember that. So now, hello Yash, nice to meet you. Perfect. So now I can ask it, what's my name? Send. So now it should be able to tell me back that your name is Yash, as you told me earlier, because I'm using a chat model instead. So I'm using a chat instance instead, and then we are collecting all of the messages inside our chat, and we can access them with the help of chat.history. So it has the data of all of the messages that we are exchanging. Perfect. So our basic model script is done at this moment, and we can perfectly chat with the Gemini AI model as well. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Inside this Flutter application, I can also include the images part, so we can upload images, and then the Gemini AI model can answer based on the images as well. So from the backend, we can pass the Gemini Pro Vision as well. So Gemini Pro Vision model, and we can pass the images from our WebSocket as well. So based on that image and text, the Gemini model can respond as well. So if you need a tutorial part 2 of this video, then make sure to subscribe my YouTube channel and let me know in the comments below as well, and I'll definitely make a part 2 for that. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned from the video. If you have any doubts, then comment them below as well, and I'll definitely come back on that.